Scientology could be called, well, you could call it a religion of religions.
Howdy everybody, and welcome to the Indie Scientology podcast. I'm your host Andy, an Ultra Space Cowboy, and these are closed-door secret briefings about vital information about Scientology and the world that you need to know. Now today's briefing is about Scientology. It's not a continuation of my legal story, my graffiti story, which I've done 4 parts now. I'm just going to intersperse this video series with one about the barriers to study, and I'll get back to this legal story because I know everyone's not really following the legal story and it doesn't even really relate to this channel, and it's going on and on and on, and there's still heaps more to go. I've just got to get it all off my chest, and it's a very interesting story about the legal system and my experience with it. So I'm going to continue with that, and I know it's not the best content, it's not going to get the most amount of views or whatever, but I'm just going to do it anyway. But you will get wiser by listening to it, because I think it's essential in this world to know how the legal system works and what potential trouble you can get into, because as soon as you stand up for what's right in this world, you will get into legal trouble. But that's another video series, so I'll be coming with part 5 next week. But this briefing today is this briefing's titled Additional Barriers to Study. And what I did is I was reading stuff, and I was reading a bunch of books, and I did this a while ago, and I made note of barriers while you're studying and reading that you can come across that Hubbard doesn't mention. Now, I haven't done the student hat, so Hubbard actually might mention some of these things in the student hat. But there's so many points here. These are like, look how many pages of notes I've got. Like, this is crazy. I'm not even going to read all these out. I'm not going to make this a 2-part video series, but you get the idea. But basically, if anyone's new to Scientology, the barriers to study is it's things that students hit while they're studying that stops them from understanding what they're studying. And you're not really taught this at school, and it's absolutely essential information, because you're not going to understand anything you study. And most people who go through the mainstream school system, they literally are graduated and they don't even know what the hell's going on, and they can't even really study properly. Well, Hubbard was really smart, and Hubbard came up with something he calls his study tech and study technology. It's technology of how to study. And the main emphasis of it is 3 points in study technology. And there are 3 barriers, there's 3 things that students hit while they're studying, and Hubbard sort of discovered these while he was trying to teach people Scientology, and he realized he needed to come up with study tech that people would do prior to doing Scientology, so that then they could study the Scientology much quicker and they could understand it better. But the 3 points are misunderstood words. So you could come up across a word like paralegal, and you're like, I don't know what paralegal means. So if you're reading something, that can be something that can stuff you up. You hit a word that you don't know what it means. This is the biggest barrier to study of them all. It's the biggest thing ever. In fact, I think it's the greatest thing the greatest idea Hubbard promoted, and I think it's the most wins you'll get out of Scientology, without a doubt, is this study technology and the looking up of words. Because once you do that, you can then study in life and learn and just expand as a person and just become much smarter and more successful. I really think it is Hubbard's best idea out of all, because Scientology's got a lot of stuff in it, a lot of mental exercises, all these things. You could throw all this stuff out, and if you just had the misunderstood word stuff and this study tech, you've taught something to somebody that's so valuable. I can't emphasize how much. Like, you could argue with a lot, and then there are people who have left Scientology, and they still look up words in a dictionary. They still know to look up words. And they say Scientology is crap and all this sort of stuff, but they still know to look up words, like people like Chris Shelton and stuff, because it's such a brilliant idea. Yet they hate Scientology, but they know it's a genius idea. But yeah, there's just like, you can boil down a lot of people's wins just down to the fact that when they got into Scientology at the start, they started looking up words, and it enabled them to understand things better and learn and study and be able to understand what the person's talking about on the TV or on the podcast or on the radio show, and they become smarter and smarter and smarter. And then they just become a better person from that. So I can't emphasize that. That's the first barrier to study. You've got to look up words that you don't know what they mean. All right. Next one is you don't have any mass on what you're being taught about. So somebody could be teaching you about tractors or jet fighter planes, and you've never seen one and you've never hopped in one, and so you just don't know what the hell they're talking about when they're trying to teach you about it. But if you've hopped in a jet fighter plane or a tractor and you've pulled the levers and you've actually seen one and seen movies with jet fighters in them and stuff like that, when you're learning about it, it's much easier to understand what's going on. And that's a really big one. That's a really good one, that barrier to study. So if students might be studying something at school, and if they haven't even seen a photo or even touched what they're learning about, they're not going to understand it and they won't get an A on their exam or something like that. The next one is a skipped gradient. And so that is when a classic example is maths. So you had a crappy teacher for your year 8 maths class. For the whole year of year 8 maths class, you had a really bad teacher. You hit year 9 and you just cannot keep up with the maths classes because you've missed out what you were supposed to learn in year 8, right? You had a skipped gradient. You were supposed to learn year 8, but you had this crappy teacher. So then year 9, you're struggling. So that's a big one that people come across, not just in maths, in other areas. They've skipped ahead too much and it's just too advanced for them, and they need to go back and learn bit by bit, you know. Because you can't teach someone year 12 maths in grade 2, you know. It's set out in the gradient. They're genius ideas. But there's additional ones to this, and I've noticed them, and I think Hubbard really made it quite simple by bringing it down to those 3 things, but there's actually a lot more going on. And so I've got my additional barriers to study. So here it is. Here is my disgraceful squirreling and verbal tech. So yeah, this is additional barriers to study and barriers to word clearing. So the first one is doublespeak. And doublespeak is politician speak, right? So you could be listening to a person at school, or you could be reading a textbook about economics and how money is printed, and you could come across doublespeak. Now, what's doublespeak? Doublespeak is political bullshit. It's salesman confusing bullshit talk that's just designed to confuse you, and it isn't understandable. It doesn't make sense, and the person's using it intentionally to have you not understand it. Do you see what I mean? So they don't want you to understand the course that they're teaching, or they don't want you to understand this chapter about how money is printed or whatever, because if you actually understood it, it would cause them problems. So, well, let's talk about COVID, because Melbourne's in lockdown right now, again for the 6th time. COVID's all political. So let's say they're talking on TV about COVID and how the COVID testing works, and they won't directly, clearly say exactly how the testing works, because then you would spot the bullshit of it. They'll say some technical thing and they'll be like, well, we take the thingos and we put it here and blah, 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 and it's sort of convoluted and complex and stuff. And they're doing it intentionally so that you just go, oh, whatever, okay, and you just trust what they're saying. So that's doublespeak. It's genius. So politicians use it when they're given a question that they don't want to give a direct answer to because it would cause controversy. Like maybe they're being asked about how the politician is cutting expenditure on schools or something like that. And the politician, the journalist says, in this budget, you've cut spending on schools by $1 billion. Why are you doing this? And the politician says, well, blah, 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 blah. And they try and make it sound good instead of like directly saying like straight up, nah, we didn't want to spend money on schools because we need to spend money on something else. Like that would be more what I would say, what Trump would say, what a politician from Texas would say. Because that's literally what you get. But when you get a Democrat, when you get a lefty, some of these people from California and New York, they use double speak like you wouldn't believe. They just dribble out blah, 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 and they're being deceptive and they're trying to twist things. But a Texan comes along and just goes, this is what we're doing. We're not having mask mandates, okay? Blah, blah, blah. And they're just direct and clear. And that's why everyone loves Trump. Because when damn well Trump came along, it was like, oh, great. Someone who doesn't use double speak. He just directly says, yeah, we're going to build a fence. We're going to do this, right? And what the thing is that when it comes to politics is most politicians are lawyers, nearly all of them. When lawyers learn doublespeak as part of their trade. It's like a classic, it's just what they do all the time. It's a technique. And so when you get someone who comes along like Trump or Pauline Hanson who aren't trained lawyers, they get there and they just speak in a way that the public can actually understand it. And it's like a breath of fresh air, right? Because they're not being deceptive and they're not being pricks. They're going to be honest. Like if I was a politician, I might say something damn controversial and I'll directly say it. I won't try and run away from it. But these other lawyer type ones, the thingos, they'll avoid saying the controversial thing. And I'll say, no, I want to give you the truth, okay? I don't want to screw you over, okay? This is what's going to happen. Yes, this is controversial. Yes, this is a tough decision I have to make, but this is what's happening, right? But if it was some politician and stuff who uses doublespeak, that they won't do that. They'll just dance around it and beat around the bush and not be direct in their answers and stuff. But anyway, so that's doublespeak. And that's what you might come across in school textbooks because it's political things. It's not like there's a lot of political stuff, right, that's going on. And anyway, so doublespeak is kind of interesting because Hubbard never brought up really the idea that someone's intentionally trying to make the person who's reading it not understand what they're communicating, right? But that can happen in this shifty world. So remember that. You might come across doublespeak in something you're studying. And I'll also say how doublespeak works is the reason it's double is because you're saying one thing but then you're saying something else at the same time, and it's like, well, is it this or is it that? Like let's say the spending example, you'll say we're spending this much on this thing, we're spending this much on that thing, and it's like you didn't answer my question. You gave me a double answer. Like you said, yeah, we're doing this but we're also doing this, and that's kind of where the idea doublespeak is. It's like you got two ideas that are sort of opposing each other, and it's causing a confusion, and it's a continuation of George Orwell's doublethink example, because George Orwell came up with doublethink, but I don't think he came up with doublespeak. But doublespeak just anyway, it sort of flowed on from that. But George Orwell's doublethink is another thing where it just doesn't make any logical sense. Somebody thinks this, but then they also think this at the same time. And we see it a lot in the world. We see a lot of doublespeak and a lot of doublethink. And when the person's explaining their doublethink, it is doublespeak that they're saying to the public. So I don't know what's going on, but basically it doesn't make any sense. It's intentionally illogical, and doublethink is I'm trying to think of an example to explain doublethink, but it's usually a victim of brainwashing who speaks doublethink, where they say something and then they contradict themselves later on, and they're holding two ideas that don't mash. So I can give you a good example. I can think of possibly a racial one or a gender example. Okay, so doublethink would probably be that they want the genders to be equal and for men and women to be treated the same, but then at the same time they will be for a women's only club, a women's only tennis club. And it's like, well, like or a women's only book reading club or something like that. And it's like, well, hold on a second. On the weekend, you were promoting this whole idea of equality and men and women being the same and there being no separation. And that club in Melbourne called the Melbourne Club, where all the rich elite go, the men, you were fighting for those men to have women at their club, right? Then yet the next weekend, you're going to your book club of women's only thingo and you've made it women's only and you like it being women's only. So why 1 minute are you criticising the men for having their Melbourne club that's men's only, and then you yourself are for a women's club that's women's only? That's doublethink. Don't you realise you're holding two ideas that go against each other? Another one is they might be fighting for some sort of racial thing, like where if let's say there might be like a town down south in America that wants to have like segregation, where there's like a black only area and a white only area, and they're saying, oh, that's terrible, it's racist, you know, give the blacks their civil rights or whatever. But then next minute they promote the idea of a black only Scouts club. And it's like, well, so you're saying that the black only Scouts club, they can have their Scouts club can be black only because the black members prefer that, and then the white people just want to have their white beach that's a whites only beach, right? I mean, why can't, like, your ideas are contradicting each other, you know? You're either for total equality, right? So not equality, this is more like you're either for total no groups being separate, or you're for groups being separate and doing whatever they want. Like, where's your equality? Like, where's your that's a double think. It doesn't make any sense, your idea. Anyway, so I went off topic with the whole double think thing, but or that example will be the woman will be like some woman from like a Democrat city or something like that, like New York City or something like that, and she'll criticize the town down south for wanting segregation, and then she will go to her women's only book club on the weekend, or her women's only gym, and they'll be like, well, we like having a women's only gym because women suit better and we get along with each other in the gym, and I'm like, that's cool. But why are you criticizing these people that are from an area that you're not even from, and you're trying to tell them what to do with their life and dictate them with your leftist bullshit, right? And this town just wants to have their area that's black and their area that's white. Why can't they be like that? Leave them alone and let them do what the hell they want to do. You're doing your women's only club. Do you want to make it women's only? Do you want to make it all ages? Because I bet you would say, no, we don't want 13-year-olds there. And they probably had some rule. So it's just doublethink. It's contradictions. It's like, no. So we all have actually some of these because we have ideas that we haven't inspected. Yeah, doublethink's interesting, but that doublethink isn't really a barrier to study, but I think it kind of is, because it's when you're reading doublethink, when you're reading someone who has doublethink, their speech might come across as being double speak, like they're intentionally trying to mislead, but they might not be intentionally trying to mislead. They just don't even know that they don't even make sense because they're idiots. So that's another barrier to study as well, is that you might be reading something by someone who's an idiot and it logically doesn't make sense because they logically don't make any other sense. So that's the second additional barrier to study. And I'm sure I've written that down somewhere here about the person just being a retard. But yeah, you have to understand that some different people have different levels of ability to think logically. Like there's a guy called Yuval Haravi, and he's some like Israeli dude, and he's, I think, a transgender or something, or a gay guy, and of course he gets promoted by the mainstream media and stuff, and he's written some books, and there's interesting ideas spoken about in the books, and one of them talks a bit about the evolution of the human body here on Earth, But some of it just doesn't make much sense because the guy doesn't have much of an ability to be logical and rational. So you're sort of reading convoluted bullshit. And that's why you might come across a problem, because you're assuming that the person makes sense, but the person's an idiot, and you can get stuck on that. And this actually happens with L. Ron Hubbard stuff as well, because some of the stuff is deep, complex. You need to look up words, you need to have life experience to understand what he's saying. But other times he legitimately is just rambling shit. And it doesn't really make that much sense. And when you look into his private life and you see what he was into and stuff like that, and the things that he sort of did and how he showed some signs of being a nutter, you understand it a lot more. I ran into this problem actually when I was doing, it was one of the things that started to wake me up was when I was reading the basics in the church and I was studying them, and I was just kind of like, what the hell with this stuff? And it was just like, I didn't realize that these books were blurted out by Hubbard in a hurry. Like, a lot of them were him actually speaking and then someone wrote them down. So I thought they were really carefully written and logical and supposed to make sense and not just supposed to be like verbal diarrhea. But then when you realize that Hubbard had a lot of verbal diarrhea and he spoke this stuff in a hurry and it was just like a first draft, then when you go to read it again, you're like, oh, okay, yeah. Like, you don't fuss about the problems with it. Whereas before I was thinking, this is supposed to make sense. Like, let's say if I was going to leave a note for you, right? I was leaving the house and I was going to leave a note for you to collect my mail or something like that. And I went, and I threw it on the table. If it had some spelling mistakes or didn't quite make sense when you came to pick it up and read it, you wouldn't fuss over it for an hour. But when you're told that this is, when it's not written on a post-it note and it's put into a formal professional book and everything, you're expecting this to be a professional, clear communication. And when you read something that doesn't quite make sense, you go, huh? I'm not understanding this. And you read it again, you go, huh? And then someone says, oh, he just blurted this out in a hurry before he left the house. Then you go, oh, okay. So with Hubbard's stuff, you might run into that problem where you don't understand that Hubbard just blurred this out in a hurry and he contradicts himself later on anyway with what he says here, and he doesn't even really care that much about it, and he just has a lot of verbal diarrhea, and it's like, then you start going, oh, okay, and you don't quite, you don't fuss over the exactness of it, and you don't keep on thinking that you're making a mistake, you think that he might be making the mistake. You know what I mean? But that's a tricky one because Hubbard might be right and you just can't understand him. I mean, it's up to you. You know, good luck with that one. So the next one is, while you're studying, random ideas can distract you. So I know Hubbard says that this can occur when you're not actually understanding what you're reading, and that is true. You can get ideas pop into your head when you get distracted. So you're reading it, you don't get what you're reading, and your mind goes off somewhere else, right? Because you've misunderstood a word in what you're reading. But also sometimes, even if you can understand what you're reading, your mind can get distracted by things. Like maybe you've got an important thing in your life happening or something like that, and you can just get distracted. Or maybe you're naturally a person who daydreams quite a lot. You can run into that problem while you're studying something where you just keep on getting ideas running through your head and keep on getting distracted. And that's kind of okay when you're studying at home, because you can stop and think about things. Because I'm a deep thinker. I really stop and think about things a lot, because I go, and I'll have a lot of ideas going through my head and stuff like that. So this is something that I experience a bit, and it's cool when I'm at home because I can just pause and go, and think deeply about things. But if you're in a Scientology course room where that's looked upon as kind of being a bad thing, because they think that it means you don't know what the words mean, they can force you to get back to your studying, and then you end up not actually realizing all the things that you could have realized because you were distracted from thinking about those things. And so that's an interesting one, I reckon. But that's why where it's kind of like, it's funny because you get involved with Scientology in the church and you have these supervisors that come in, they're like Scientology teachers, and they teach you some things like looking up words in the dictionary, which are great ideas, but at the same time they do other things that come across and actually fuck up your ability to study. So it's just a retarded religion. I mean, it's interesting. It's an interesting rabbit hole to go down. It's an interesting adventure, but it is kind of retarded. But also that's why you've got to, as a Scientology supervisor, you've got to be really reasonable. I think you've got to be reasonable about things and casual about things and not be very Nazi-like, or not be very strict-like. Like, don't be like, oh, that person looks like they're daydreaming. Bam, he must have a misunderstood word, you know. Be more casual about it, because he might just be a deep thinker. Because seriously, some people just don't think about things deeply. Some people just don't have that that ability in their mind. They genuinely don't have that ability. And one thing that's interesting is that when you do hallucinogenics, like ayahuasca or something like that, that activates your pineal, and your pineal, I think, releases DMT or releases some sort of chemical, and it opens up your ability to think deeply, and you can see conspiracies deeper and stuff, and you can walk around in life and see deeper into things and not just see things superficially. So you have a lot more daydreaming sort of moments, if you know what I mean. You have a lot more pondering moments. But other people who don't have big pineals, because I honestly think it's a pineal thing. Some people have more pineal activation naturally compared to other people. And you can do ayahuasca and yoga to activate your pineal, but other people, they naturally just don't have an active pineal gland. And this is why you can hear about Alex Jones, because he's not into any funky substances, but he talks about him knowing about the pineal, and he says that he has the craziest DMT dreams and shit because he's naturally got a very active pineal gland. Just naturally he has it. And other people naturally don't have it. So when they're walking around in life, they just see things superficially, and they just see a physical 3D world, and they can't see deeply behind things. But other people can see like, whoa, insights into things, and be like, you can see, like someone could be walking across there and they could have messy hair, and a person with deep insight can see deeper and to go, oh, I know why they have messy hair. It's because of blah, 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 right? But when you don't have that ability, you just see someone walk past with messy hair and you don't even think anything about it. And I know what this is like, because I was like this before my pineal gland started to activate. And my pineal gland activated when I was about 19 years old. It first started. And before then, it was just physical universe. I didn't see deeply into anything. I didn't have any much deep ponderings or discoveries and stuff. But when your pineal gland starts activating, you then start seeing deeper into things and going, oh, I know why, blah, 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 blah. Like, let's say you're an animal, right? Yes, I'll give you a good example. Let's say you're a cat and you hang around your owner all day and they sit in front of this box and you don't think anything of it. You're just a cat and you're just purring. You just notice they keep on looking at a box. Then one day, the cat's pineal gland activates and the cat sees the screen, sees that there's a story on the screen and goes, oh my God, my owner is watching a story on the TV, and that's why he's always near the TV and looking at that box, because it's like a story and he's following the story. Oh my God! And the cat is like having an origination and a realization. It's like, whoa, that's deep, dude. You know? And so that's what taking ayahuasca, and that's what activating the pineal gland does. It literally makes you're going on in life and your pineal gland kicks in and suddenly you can see deeper into things and more insight, and you're like, whoa, I know, whoa, I know why there's rainbow flags at the stuff at the shopping center. Oh my God! Like you just see deeper and deeper into things, and you usually it's stuff about your life, and you start realizing things and all this sort of stuff. You're like, oh, I know why this person acts like that, and blah 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 blah. And the pineal gland activation did that. So you could be somebody who just doesn't have an active pineal gland naturally, right? And they can sit there in the course room and study deep philosophy and just be like, okay, and just not see anything deep into it. But or you could be someone with a big pineal gland and you'll be reading it and going, whoa, 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 and having all these moments of like, I got to ponder and shit. You know what I mean? I got to think about that. You know. So that's another thing. I guess you could say, yeah, a pineal gland activation will distract you from studying, but just if you have lots of random ideas and you think deeply about things, that you can get distracted while you're studying because of that. And it's actually not a bad thing. And it's kind of a shame the way the education system is because it's all about speed and time. A huge thing about it is speed and time. And Scientology, which is supposed to be against that, does have speed and time because the soups are trying to get the most amount of points for you as possible, and they think that slow students equals a bad thing and stuff. So the students tend to, this is how Hubbard stuffed up his own religion by introducing these ideas, but these soups will get you to speed through things instead of maybe you was actually supposed to be slow on that because then you'll get heaps out of it. But the school system is much more so than Scientology, is all about speed, and it's just like they start the tests and it's just like boom, boom, speed, 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 and you go to uni and you just get all this stuff and you got to read blah, 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 and it's just all about speed, right? So it's training you to not actually ponder and look deeply and think deeply into things. So it trains you out of all that, and it ruins education really, because there should be no speed limits or time limits on things. You've got to have your own originations and realize your own things from what you're studying, and you shouldn't be stopping yourself from thinking about something because you've got some deadline to make. That's why I left uni, because I was like, this is just shit. This is just more of what high school's like. Now, this is a really, really big one. This is called lack of experience. And this is similar to lack of mass. But Hubbard doesn't fully go into this, and I don't know if he was fully aware of it, but lack of experience is a definite barrier to study. So it's like lack of mass is more like you're learning about a tractor and you haven't seen a tractor before, or you're learning about tennis and you haven't actually watched a tennis game before. But lack of experience is more abstract. It's more stuff in life. Like, for example, you're reading a story and it's about a love story and a relationship, and then it ends in a divorce and they go to court and all that sort of stuff. If you haven't experienced that yourself, if you haven't fallen in love, if you haven't had a divorce and gone to family court and all that sort of stuff, while you're listening to or studying this thing about this person's experience, because you don't have that experience yourself, you struggle to understand it because you haven't had that life experience. Another example might be like salesman talk. Now, let's say you might have done a salesmanship training course and the guy delivering it was really sleazy. He literally trained his students to bamboozle them with bullshit and to get the sale. You have that experience. Then 3 years down the track, you're hearing someone tell you a story about a light bulb salesman or a solar panel salesman, some of this grainy government bullshit, a solar panel salesman. And by the way, I'm not against solar energy or free energy or better technology. I'm against what they're pushing because it's all controlled and it's all to make money and it's not going to make things better and it's all to control people and it's all an agenda. You know, it's like the electric car thing. That's all controlled. You're going to have a special thingo to. You're going to have a special license to release the electric car that they want. If somebody just Joe Blow invented an awesome solar panel or an awesome electric car and just said, yeah, I'm selling it, the government will come along and slap licenses and restrictions and say, no, you need to tax it, and no, you need to do it this way, and all be closed down. And also, solar panels are just bullshit because they're not effective. The government secretly has really effective solar panels. They intentionally implement ones that aren't effective because power companies don't want to lose money. And also, they're more expensive, they die out, but also there's technology that's way better. There's like a little box that you can just put in your house, a little box, like a box like that or something like that, and you can have free energy forever. They're keeping that sort of stuff secret from you because they want to control you. It's all about control. So that's why it's bullshit, okay? So not like some evil right-winger that's like, what is it? This is why people, lefties and idiots like Chris Shelton, they're just so dumb because they'll hear me say a statement like solar panel bullshit and they'll be like, what an idiot, look at this right-wing moron, blah, 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 blah. Or I'll say something criticizing the electric car and they'll go, what a dumbass, blah, blah, blah. The truth is that they're a dumbass because they don't understand my communications. That's the problem with these lefties, these idiots, is because they always throw fits at stuff that I say and other right-wingers say because they actually don't even understand the communication. They don't have enough life experience. They're dumb, okay? Honestly, you look up in a proper dictionary should have one of the definitions for a lefty should say just a dumb person. Now, anyway, a dumb over emotional person. Now, I want to just mention actually the COVID situation, and this is off topic, but I wanted to mention it before. But we'll just do a little interlude here, or whatever the word is. It's just outrageous what they are doing to Australia. Like, it's just what the fuck. It's what the fuck. I mean, man, it is insane. We've just entered our 6th lockdown now. And the 5th lockdown, we only went out of the 5th lockdown a week ago. So a week later, they put us into another lockdown. I mean, when you think that the government's going to give you a break, right, and they're going to ease up on things and stuff, and, you know, it might be another 2 months till we do a lockdown or something like that. It's just like, no, like 7 days later, boom, we're giving you another lockdown. And it's like, are you serious? It's just, they don't stop. They are brutal. Wherever you are, you've got to fight every single restriction they put in. Even like the mask thing. You need to fight the mask thing like there's no tomorrow, because once they get that in, then they get the next thing, and then they get the next thing, and when they get a lockdown in, they ask for another lockdown, and a lockdown with stricter rules, and they just do not stop. They keep on going. It's fucking insane. Right? This is crazy shit. You want to see how crazy Melbourne is on a whole new level. So last year, 7 months in total we spent locked up. And there was only a little break in the middle. So it was like 7 full months of the year were locked down. And they were more strict than places like Sydney or Kansas City, like definitely Kansas City, but like Sydney and those, like it was strict, it was fairly strict rules. This year, I think they've implemented even stricter rules. Like you're not allowed to go 5Ks past your house. They're starting to say, like in Sydney, they're starting to say that you can't leave your house unless you had your vaccine for construction workers. So they've started introducing that. But it is just crazy. But anyway, so we had 7 months last year. So last year, they used the long lockdown technique. This year, they're using a different technique, which is called the short lockdown, and they call it the snap lockdown. And it's a quick lockdown that's called nice and fast and nice and strict. Really fast, real quick, so that we don't have to do a long lockdown. But the reason why that's crappy is, what if you just do heaps of short lockdowns? It's still crap. And it causes problems for businesses because they can't watch the news and predict when the lockdown's coming. It's just like they're going along, they buy their stocks of their food and other stuff, they make their bookings, they're all planned and stuff, these poor businesses, I feel, and they're all going bankrupt and stuff. And then if the government says, the cases are more today, and they're even more the next day, you can start going, you can start predicting that lockdown's coming and you can start making changes. Or if they say, look, in 3 days' time, we've got to lock the whole place down, you have a chance. But what they're doing with these snap lockdowns is they're just going, boom, we're calling a lockdown today. And I'm not kidding, that's how fast it was. So, well, actually, starting at the start of the year, it was more like 1 or 2 days, like maybe 3 days or something like that. But the last one, they literally called it in 1 day, right? They were like, they did a press conference in the morning and were like, there's heaps of cases today. And when I say heaps, it's like 7 cases. I'm not joking, it's 7 cases, okay? And then they say, they go, we might have to do a lockdown, we might have to call a lockdown, and then we're going to do a press conference at 4 o'clock. And then at 4 o'clock, they do a press conference. And before that, at like 2 o'clock, they start announcing, we're going to go into a lockdown, they're going to go into a lockdown. Then at 4 o'clock, they say, yes, we're going to go into lockdown. And we're going to go into lockdown from 8 p.m. tonight. So that's what they called. That was what happened a few days ago on Thursday. So it was like, I couldn't predict it at all. I just saw one article in the morning that said there's a few cases, and I just thought, I hope they're not getting us prepped for like a new lockdown. And I was thinking like a lockdown that would come in a week's time or like at least a few days' time. But then boom, that day they hit us with the lockdown, and it's like, are you serious? And like thousands of people went to Sydney in protesters, and I couldn't go because of work and stuff. But that's insane. It's so crazy. And also our Premier said he basically said, look, in the future we're going to do a lockdown, and it's only for the vaccinated, and you can come out of the lockdown if you got the vaccine. But he didn't even say that. He said that we're going to lock down until everyone's vaccinated. So that's even crazier, because that almost implies that all these baby boomers who have gotten their vaccine and stuff, they have to wait till we get to the 80% vaccinated rate, and then we can come out of lockdown. So that screws them over. But basically he said that. He goes, a few days ago, he said, we're going to do this lockdown, we're going to go hard and fast, because otherwise this could get out of hand, we could get more cases, and then we'll have to lock down until we've got everyone vaccinated. And it's like, whoa. And he's like, so I don't want to do that, blah, blah, blah. And he said, I don't want to do that because we don't have enough vaccine at the moment, because logistically, Australia's been really late, which I think was intentional, on getting the vaccine. So to do that sort of lockdown when not everyone actually has a chance to get the vaccine and not enough vaccine centres are actually up and running, that's a bit unreasonable. So that's why in a few months' time, it's going to happen. They're going to do it. They are going to lock down and say, no, we're not lifting this until we have 80% of the population vaccinated. Or we're never going to lift this lockdown until you get the vaccine. So the government really is forcing people. So anyone who's listening to this, be wary and fight everything, because Australia is very socialistic, is very New World government, and what happens here happens in is what they want for the rest of the world. Like they want everywhere to be like Melbourne and Australia. And I thought it was just Melbourne, and I don't know how Sydney got away with what happened to them for the first year of the pandemic. But now they're doing a major lockdown of Sydney for ages, and they're pulling a Melbourne on Sydney, and so Sydney is also way too leftist. Like I knew Sydney was a police state, but I thought this is so typical it's Melbourne, but now they're doing it to Sydney, so it's just like, and Brisbane's so similar. So it's just the Australia and New Zealand area, they are just write-offs, and I think Canada as well. They're really hitting those Commonwealth countries hardcore, and it's just... it's insane, but there's always ways around it. Someone will invent some app that's like a fake vaccine certificate, or you can come up with a way to earn money where you don't have to work for some big corporation or government organization, so you don't have to get the vaccine. Or you can come up with bribes, and you've got to be positive. There's always, I'm totally positive about it. There's always ways around it and stuff. But this COVID thing is just, it's so bad. It's so bad, but maybe it's just that bad for Australia. Maybe there are other areas that it's good for you, but not certain areas. This is a serious commie takeover. I mean, this is like, whoa, and there's all these signs in the city and shit. Anyway, I went off topic. So I was talking about the lack of experience barrier. This really is a massive one in general. It's massive. Like, if you haven't come across a conspiracy in your life, actually witnessed it, then when you're listening to someone talk about conspiracy theories, you're not going to be able to quite understand them. You're not going to be able to understand how the justice system is corrupted and there's conspiracies going on in the justice system, the legal system. That's why I'm doing that video series of the legal system, so you get experience, you get my experience in the legal system, so then you can understand the legal system, because you have experience now in the legal system. And this relates to Hubbard's idea, I think, of datums of comparable magnitude, which he goes on in the Data Evaluators course. And the Data Evaluators course is the next step above the Student Hat, but they're related. The Basic Study Manual, the Student Hat, the Data Evaluators course, they're all sort of similar. They all get you able to view information, understand it, basically. So datums of comparable magnitude is like you're reading about something and you've got datums in your memory bank that relate to what they're talking about. You've got data, it's about that, and you can understand it then. You know, because if you don't have that datum, you're going to have problems making any sense of it. So lack of experience, it's a big one, especially with Scientology, and when Hubbard's talking about stuff from the early days of Scientology, and you have no idea what was going on back then. And you don't even know how people spoke back in the 50s and what was in fashion. And it's all so different. You lack all those experiences and you struggle to understand it. That's why people 100 years ago, if they were listening to this briefing, would really struggle to make any sense of it. They wouldn't understand Facebook. They wouldn't have known that Trump was elected. They wouldn't have known this or that. And it's just all this stuff. You know, you need all these experiences. Like, you can go look up a word in the dictionary. Like, you can look up, let's say the word, say you come across the word while you're studying, it's the word Freemasonry. And you look up in the dictionary and you go, great, I know what Freemasonry is. I looked it up in the dictionary, I know, I understand that word now. Well, you don't really understand the word, not fully. You just have a really, really basic idea of what the word is. But if you've actually been a Freemason for like 20 years and you've actually have all this experience with Freemasonry, you really understand the word Freemason, and you can understand then what you're reading much more. And this is why it's hard for people to understand the briefing I'm giving now and conspiracy theories and stuff like what David Icke and Alex Jones talk about and stuff, because they just have so much lack of experience and they don't have full definitions of things and stuff. And this is why, and it might put them off the stuff, and it's a barrier while they're trying to study it. This is why when you study these things, years later you can read the same thing again and go, whoa, I get all this, I get it, oh my God, I understand it so much more. Because now you have all this experience, you have much more experience and much more knowledge. And now when you're reading it again, you realize all these new things and you're like, oh, I get it. Like for me, for example, a classic example is the book 1984. I read that, I think actually about 4 times, right? But only when I read it this year, the 5th time, did I actually fully understand the book. actually get the whole story. I fully understand it. I appreciate it. It's absolutely genius, right? I had lack of experience before that. I hadn't experienced a COVID fake pandemic. I hadn't worked out that the government was starting bushfires in order to make people think that global warming's happening. I hadn't understand that a lot of wars that were going on in the world were actually fake wars, right? I didn't understand that manipulation and how shifty things were and how masses can get deceived and tricked about things. Also actually relates a bit to Scientology, because in Scientology there's a bit of mass deception on the bank and clear and all that sort of stuff. And Scientologists get into this echo chamber where they just repeat the same ideas to each other and stuff, and they reinforce this idea, but it can be bullshit. And it's the same as a COVID pandemic. You got a baby boomer and his friends with another baby boomer, and they're brainwashed by the mainstream media about COVID, and they are in an echo chamber, and they're just saying, yeah, this is about COVID, yeah, that, and they're all just talking about a fake thing. And it's not based in any reality, but they think it's real, right? So that can happen, and it's actually happening a bit in Scientology. But now that I know that, I can read a book like 1984 and I can understand the story, and I can go, whoa, I get this. Like, these ideas, I think, before I had datums of comparable magnitude and before I had life experience, I think that I probably thought the ideas in the book were just too ridiculous, or I just couldn't understand how they were possible. But now I get how they're possible. For example, in the 1984 book, he talks about how his job at the ministry is to fake some statistics about the amount of boots that are produced. And he says how the statistic of how many boots were produced originally was false, and now they've had to modify the statistic because not enough boots were produced, and the new statistic of how many boots were produced is actually false. And it's quite possible no boots were produced at all, and it's just false statistic on top of false statistic, and it's all just bullshit. Years ago, I would probably find that too hard to believe, but I actually get that now. You've got, like, for example, our government organisations who talk about the unemployment rate or the economic growth rate and stuff like that. It's just bullshit upon bullshit upon bullshit. And it's just falseness all round. And it's just 1984. We are living in a modern 1984. And that's what they're trying to install, actually, with this whole COVID thing. It's a modern, electronic, advanced version of 1984. 1984 was communism 1950 style. COVID is communism 2021 style. Communism in the 21st century. It's a whole new level. But like, they shut down the economy. It's like, it's beyond the Great Depression. It's like, whoa. I mean, they just closing things, right? While the lockdowns are going on, they're actually closing things, right? And then when they're opening up, they're like half open, and then some things just never open up. So economically, it is beyond a depression. It's a great shutdown. It's not a Great Depression, it's a great shutdown. It's just like the statistics of GDP are like, it's not like, oh, you know, yeah, we experienced a 5% recession or a 10% recession or something like that. It's like, no, it's epic. It's like 50%, it's like 75%. It's huge. It's huge. But the government statistics, of course, are propaganda and a bullshit, and are just false statistics. And they just go, yeah, you know, the economy went down 3% or whatever, or they say one of the things they lie about is they say that the unemployment rate is back to, unemployment rate is back to better than pre-pandemic levels. And you're just like, are you serious? There's like police signs all over Melbourne. They don't announce how many people are on unemployment benefits Because if they did, people will go, well, hold on a second. There's all these people receiving benefits. It's boomed massively. Like, how are we back to having as much employment as before the pandemic? Like, it's just a complete lie. And not only that, the statistic before the pandemic was already propaganda and bullshit. So this is where it's lies upon lies and lies in the news report referring to a lie that's already in a news report. And it's just 1984. That's why the book's so brilliant, because it's just what happens when you get these shifty people. They just destroy everything. But they have the balls to say just epic lies like that. Like, unemployment is back to what it was before the pandemic. And it's like, are you serious? It's just outrageous statements. It's just blatant. What they do is when they're making a lie, they feel comfortable making a really, really big lie, because the person, when they hear it, just gets confused and then just accepts it. And so it's actually an act of doublespeak to say those sort of statistics. Because the person is just like, what the hell? So a person who has common sense is like, huh? Like, they just go into confusion and then they just go whatever and go into apathy. So it's just so shifty. But like the stock market, for example, being at all-time highs, and it's just a joke. It's just pumped up with fake money, and it doesn't mean that the economy is doing good or anything. It's just a false statistic, what the stock market's doing. Just because its stock market's at all-time high doesn't mean the economy is going good. It means that the economy has been filled up with all this inflation, and people are putting there's all this money that's being pumped into the stock market to make it look like things are okay, because people use the stock market as a way to measure the economic activity, like the GDP statistic. So now the stock market statistic is just false because it's all pumped up, and the GDP statistic is just directly a lie. Like, there's just no indirectness to it like a stock market thing. It is just directly a lie. But that's it. That's what's going on right now. It's just insane, and lack of experience. So now I've got these life experiences and stuff. I can understand in the book when he's talking about looking on the telescreen and seeing the war, and them talking about an army moving across Africa, and they're showing arrows on the screen, and he says that might not even be an army that's on the screen there. That might just be a pretend war they're talking about. Like, or they're presenting the war in a sort of fake way, and it's just designed to control the masses. And I think years ago I would have found that just too ridiculous, so I just couldn't get it. But now I can totally get it. It's just, that's what goes on. It's the truth about things. That book, 1984, is the most genius book ever. It is just so genius. That's why I had to go at John Attack for criticising 1984, because I just thought, you are an idiot. I mean, to criticise 1984, you're just an idiot. You you just don't understand how genius the book is. He has a long way to go. He's a bit of a lefty, and they can read a lot and memorise certain things, but they just never really understand what's going on in the world, because they're just not smart enough for it. They don't have those extra gears in their mind, like the pineal thing I was saying to you. They can't go into a fifth gear or a seventh gear. Other people are just stuck in fourth gears and 2 gears, and dogs are stuck in 1 gear mentally. They just can't see deep into things. Anyway, now, okay, hold on, I'm just reading through. Okay, English language not making sense. Now, this might be a barrier which foreign people will come across who English isn't their first language. But the English language is a bit of a retarded language. So you have to factor that in. Like the way things are spelling-wise. Sorry, I just saw a shadow. That's really interesting. I think I just saw a ghost. Honestly. There's no one in the room. There's no wind. The room's completely closed up. There's no animal in the room. But I saw like a really slight shadow move in front of the curtains. So that's cool. So that's the first time I've sort of seen a ghost thing, because I've never really seen a ghost, but it was a really shitty ghost experience. It reminds me of how I've seen a UFO, but just in such a crappy way. But it probably really was a UFO, and I probably saw that, because I can't think of anything of what that was. But it was just like a really slight shadow on the curtain. Anyway, that's cool that I saw that. But these things are real. Ghosts are absolutely real. But I'm going to move on. And it's funny because last week when I was making a briefing, I mentioned something about a ghost switching the camera off or something like that, because the camera switched off and it wasn't supposed to. And I was like, oh, it could be a ghost. Well, now it's like a little backup that I'm like, there's some freaking ghost there. You prick. But also, do you know what these things can be? These things can actually be remote viewers. So I could be remote viewing myself in the future. Like I could gain the ability to remote view and go, I want to check out myself in 2021. Did you see that? That moved. I mean, that could have been a ghost. That globe just moved just then. But that could, we could argue that that was just gravity or something like that. But that, honestly, the ghost could have made that energy happen of that globe just moving. I mean, you saw it just tilted down. But that could have been a ghost thing. But that wasn't as definite. I believe more in the shadow thing. But unless... Just thinking if this moved before and then it created... Nah, it's not creating a shadow thing. Anyway, I reckon that's ghost activity. But... I can't even remember what I was saying. Well, anyway, last week I said the ghost could have switched the camera off. And then now this week I sort of see a ghost. I think that's what I was saying. Anyway, so saying how the English language doesn't make sense. There are some expressions that almost are just sort of colourful expressions in the English language that don't really make sense. And words that people throw into sentences that are just a habit that don't even really make sense. Like they're not even necessary. You can just delete that word from the sentence and it means the sentence makes sense, and it's just an extra word they're just adding because they're colourful in their speech. So I just want to see if my movement creates a shadow. Nah. So I think English language people will come across this. But we come across it, people who don't speak English natively, because they'll be like, what does this word mean in the dictionary? And they look it up and they can't really quite understand this English language word or expression. And it's just like, yeah, it's just a retarded expression that means nothing. That's what you have to understand. So that's definitely a barrier to study. But we come across this when we read stuff from 100 years ago, because they had different expressions and sayings and stuff. And we just quite can't get it. We're just like, huh? Like we just don't, because we're not from that generation. And they spoke this sort of way. And Hubbard speaks a bit like this sometimes. So you just run into these sort of problems. That's a barrier. Okay, I sort of mentioned this before, but another barrier is a misunderstood concept. And it sort of relates to the misunderstood word, but it's like you don't really fully understand this concept. And by just looking up the word in a dictionary, you can't really understand it from looking up the word in the dictionary. You need a full understanding of the concept. So you need to listen to an hour-long, like let's say it's a New World Order. You're studying something and it mentions a New World Order. You need to listen to the Wikipedia page, which goes for an hour of ideas about the New World Order and what the New World Order is. You need to look up the words New World Order. You need to have looked a bit into Freemasonry and study communism for years, and all these things, and then you really understand the concept of the New World Order. Like me now, I really get the idea now. I get it now. But when I first heard like Alex Jones say it like 6 years ago, or even like 4 years ago, I didn't really fully get it, you know? So it was like a misunderstood concept, even though if you asked me, what does New World Order mean? I could answer, but I didn't really get it. So you have this problem where you don't understand concepts. It's a bit deeper, it's a bit more abstract, but you can run into problems with that. So yeah. There's also some words you'll come across when you go to look them up in the dictionary, and the dictionary just can't describe the word in the dictionary. It doesn't give you a good enough example. You really need to speak to someone who knows what that word means, and they can show you pictures and they can explain the idea, and then you can get it. But the dictionary you've got, even if you've got 3 dictionaries, it's hard to describe this word and the idea that this word represents in the dictionary. And you can keep on reading it and you just don't get it. And you're just like, I can't get what this word is. And it's like, it's because you need someone to just tell you who actually knows what the word means and stuff, and you can sort of get it more. Like there's such a thing called dry humor. If you sort of look up dry in a dictionary and trying to find this idea of what dry humor is in the dictionary, you're just going to struggle with that. And the dictionary, I don't think there's many dictionaries that are excellent. Because an ideal dictionary would be an electronic one that has all the different usages of the way the word is used, like the way the word means, the different meanings of the word, then example sentences, multiple, then a video showing somebody using that word like in a sentence, and then pictures, like the whole package. It's almost like an encyclopedia combined with a dictionary, and someone could make $1 million if they did this. Just really made a good comprehensive thing, so you look something up and you go, oh my God, I can get it now because it's everything. But a lot of the time it's just not the case. So you can run into that problem where the dictionaries just can't describe the word or the thing that it is. It's almost like some things you have to just see it in person to get what it is. And you can't explain it in a sentence. So you can run into that barrier of study. Another barrier is wordy dictionaries, and that's dictionaries that use lots of fancy words in them. So when you go to look up the word in a dictionary, they explain it, but they use lots of words that are sort of difficult in that explanation of what the word is. So you end up having to look up more words, and I mean, this isn't groundbreaking. I think most Scientologists know about this, but it's a definite barrier to while you're studying. It's just shitty, not clear, not simple definitions of what words mean. Because some of these fancy university types like to throw around fancy words and use lots of words to try and make them appear smarter. But it just causes problems when you just want a simple, direct answer as to what the word means. Sometimes there's just incorrect dictionaries, for example. So you're looking up a word and the dictionary is just incorrect. Because they're not really defining it right, or it's just a hard thing to define and they're just incorrect. So good luck with that one, you know. I mean, how are you supposed to know the dictionary is incorrect? But anyway. Another barrier in study you can run into is that the word you're looking up is the same as another word, but Hubbard's told you that no word is the same, because part of the study technique you sort of learn that no word is the same as another word. But little and small are pretty similar. They're the same thing, okay? And this is what Scientologists do where they go crazy with the study tech, is they'll fuss over that. They'll think that, oh, large and big, there's a difference between large and big because Hubbard said so. And honestly, like he said that there's, yes, no two words mean the same thing or something like that, or you have to look up your words if you don't know what they mean. And it just sort of caused some confusion. So now students in Scientology go to look up words and they can't quite get the idea of the word because the word they're looking up is large and it just means big, and they can get it straight away. What's large? They don't know what large means. They look it up and they're thinking, oh, it's big, but it can't be the same as big. It has to be large. It has to be different. So they keep on thinking about it, and it slows them down in their study and it causes problems. And someone asks them, the supervisor asks them, what does the word large mean? And they go big because they're rebellious. And the supervisor says, no, it's not big because that's just a simple definition for that word, or you're just using another word as a synonym. But the truth is that large just is big, okay? So it's just a stupid thing that Study Tech has done and supervisors and Hubbard has done, this idea that no two words mean the same thing. There are so many, that's the number one thing you need to realize when it comes to looking up words in the dictionary. There are so many words in our languages that mean the same as another word. We have come up with so many different words, because English is like a hodgepodge mixture of all these languages and stuff. There's just so many words for the same idea. Okay, so don't realize that. Okay, don't buy the bullshit that there's always differences between words. Okay, another barrier to study is a bad memory. And you'll come across this when you look up a word and you just simply don't have a good memory. Some people have great memories. They just have better memories than other people. It's an absolute fact. And so if your memory isn't as good as others, you'll look up a word and then you'll understand it and then you'll just forget it. And then later on you have to look it up again and it slows you down. But someone with a good memory can memorize the definition better, and so doesn't have to keep on looking up the dictionary, so they don't keep on slowing down, so they don't have that barrier. A bad memory is a barrier. So this is why it's good to not eat a lot before studying. Seriously, to not eat a lot, and also don't study during the afternoon siesta thing. So between the hours of 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. we naturally have a period where we kind of want to have a nap. Now if you're studying during that period or doing any auditing or meditation, you're going to have problems not falling asleep, and it's going to be a barrier, and while you're it's going to be a barrier while you're studying. It's going to slow you down. And when you're tired like that, what goes is your memory. So if you're studying during that period, you're going to have problems with your memory and you're going to have problems with words. And it's a body problem and it's a sleeping problem. And in general, you should have good sleeps and stuff like that, and not overeat and not eat heavy food, because all those things make you tired. And it's all stuffs around with your memory. So, yeah, that's a barrier to studying. Another problem is that is that when you're looking up a word in the dictionary, a word can have multiple meanings for that word, and the thing you're reading, they could be referring to definition 1 or definition 5 of that word. They're using it in definition 1 way or definition 5 way. You don't know, and you've got to work it out, but you don't know, so how are you going to work it out? So that's part of the problem, is that you go, okay, I don't know what this word means, so I'm going to go look it up, and then you look it up and there's different meanings for the one word, because some words have many definitions. They're used in many different ways. But You'll realise this when you look up words in the dictionary. And so, I mean, how are you supposed to know what's the definition that the person's using of that word? You just kind of have to read the definitions and see which one fits. Well, what if you just you make a wrong guess as to which one fits? Then you can run into problems. So that's just a problem you have to put up with. You have to work it out. You have to just try and be as smart as you can and try and see which one is the best definition. But that's a barrier. The next barrier to study is the thing you are reading contains a lie. Just an intentional direct lie. And it throws you off and it slows you down. And you think maybe you're not understanding it or something like that, but you are understanding it. It's just that you know that that's not true, so you think you're not understanding it right, and it just slows you down. For example, the mainstream media has been using propaganda this year, and they were using it last year, where they were saying the Death Valley part of California was recording the world's hottest temperature ever recorded. While you're watching the news, you can hit a barrier to that study, that by hearing that report, because you're just like, huh? What that statement is it's just a direct lie. It's just not true. Okay, they just made up that the Death Valley was getting all-time record high temperatures, the hottest temperatures in the world. That's not true. There's parts of Africa where their deserts regularly get up to those sort of temperatures, so, I mean, if you sort of know that, then when you read that, you hear that news report, it throws you off and it's like a barrier to understanding, because you're like, what? Because you just don't realise that the person's lying. So, direct lies in what you're studying can be a barrier to study, because if you don't know it's a direct lie, then you can believe it and you're getting tricked by it, and you're not actually really understanding what you're listening. Because to properly understand that news report about the Death Valley temperature, to properly understand it, fully understand it, you have to have known that that was a lie and realised that that was a lie while you were reading it. If you read it and at the end of it didn't cognite that that was a lie, you haven't properly understood that news report. You know what I mean? So, and how are you gonna know the weather history and stuff? So this is why watching the mainstream news, because they can contain direct lies, not just twists or exaggerations, but just direct lies. And you don't know it's a direct lie, then you can get confused and tricked by things. The next barrier to study is that you are reading content that was spoken. And I mentioned this earlier, but it's a definite barrier. You have to understand that when someone's speaking something, they're using hand gestures, they're saying emphasis on certain words, and when you're watching them, you can understand them better. But if it's then translated into a book form where you're not looking at the person, where you can't see the emphases and the pauses and stuff, it's harder to understand. So, so that can be a barrier, because you're reading it and you're like, huh? You just can't get it because you need to hear this person to understand it. So yeah, that's another barrier. So I've got to wrap up this briefing, but I'm not joking. I mean, what am I supposed to say about this sort of shit? I'm only not even half the way through the page of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like 11 pages of barriers to study. And I'm sure that some of these are repeats of previous ones, because that's what I've noticed so far, is that they're ideas that I've already mentioned and that there's a little bit of a repeating going on, and sometimes I'm skipping points that I've made because I've sort of already mentioned them in earlier ones. But that's how many additional barriers to study there is. This is epic. And this is why it's like Hubbard's really simplified the whole idea of barrier to study, because it's like It's like there's a lot more barriers to study than just the three you mentioned, Hubbard. Like there's a whole lot more shit going on. But at least he's heading us in the right direction. But some people who are dogmatic like Scientologists and think robotically, they think that there's only 3 barriers to study or whatever, or it's only how Hubbard says it is, and he was a genius and that's it. And so they close off their mind to realizing that there's other reasons why they're running into problems while they're studying. But there are other reasons. And my estimate is this needs definitely 2 more briefings to try and get through all these. And I don't even know if I want to get through them, to be honest, because I'm supposed to be wrapping up this podcast and moving on to other things. But there's other points in here. Well, I already mentioned this one. This is a classic example. Time's a barrier to study, because if you're in a hurry, it can really stuff you around in trying to understand it. Material contains data that offends you. So this would happen a lot with lefties like Chris Shelton and John Attack. They seem to get offended by things. If they're reading something that's got data that offends them or sort of shocks them, they can't understand it properly, and they sort of freeze up and shit and freaks them out. And then that's a barrier for them to studying it. A classic example would be racial data. If they actually read stuff that was true, correct racial data, they go, oh, and they freak out, block it, that's not possible, and they I don't know, mentally they just freeze up and go crazy, and or their mind overloads from it, and they will then attack it, or they'll stop reading it or something like that. So that's an actual barrier to study for them, is data that offends them. That's why they've got serious problems. Another one is materials contradict themselves. So you're reading something and then it contradicts something that they mentioned earlier, and that sort of throws you off and makes you go, huh, what the hell? And Hubbard does this because he would say something and then you'll be reading something from Hubbard and it'll say, this cures this problem, and then it's like, hold on a second, I thought you said Dianetics. I read like a year ago you said Dianetics cures this problem, and you're contradicting yourself, and it sort of throws you off. So that's a problem that you're reading when you come across when materials contradict themselves within their own materials. So look, I've got to wrap this up, but I'm thinking of, this is almost like the graffiti story briefing, where I want to go through these because these are just good ideas. I mean, is it just me, or was that a good briefing or what? Like, honestly, they were great points. I mean, seriously, if you know these things, when you go to study and read things and watch movies, you can really understand them. And I want to know what other ones I've come up with. Because obviously I realised them a year ago when I wrote this, but it's like, this is great information. And it can help me to understand things in the future. So I guess I'm just going to have to do 3 more briefings on this barrier to studies. So, all right, I'm going to do it then. I'm going to do it, but I'll flick between the graffiti story no, I think I want to go back to the graffiti story, and I want to finish that off, because that is just, whoa, I want to get that over and done with. But then I'll come back to these briefings about the barriers to study. So I've been your host, Andy, Ultra Space Cowboy. You've been listening to the Indie Scientology podcast. So remember, what you thought was impossible is possible.